If you're learning Spanish, what if I told you there are 8 magical words that if you mastered them, would give you the ability to say 87% of the things you need to say in your normal daily life? And that the reason it takes you 5, 6, 7 years to learn Spanish is because most of the courses and books out there focus mostly on a random assortment of words and complicated grammar you know you're not going to need in your normal daily interactions. So why do you think these 8 words help you form thousands of sentences so quickly? Well, it's because they're found in pretty much any sentence you can think of, and in a minute you'll see exactly what I mean. If you don't know me, my name is Rob. I learned 6 languages over the last 20-something years and picked up a degree in linguistics along the way. But I always felt so frustrated that it took so long to learn a language, and I got fed up with every language course, book, and grammar lesson out there. I always wanted to know if a language could be learned in 5 weeks instead of 5 years.
One day I came across some research that still today, most people, including language course creators, don't seem to have discovered. And this information gave me a huge boost forward. A language like Spanish has around 90,000 words, but a native speaker only knows about 30,000. So already you can see that about 2/3 of the language is useless in real life.
But it gets better. In a normal day, a person uses about 1,000 different words. And the best part is, 80% of what we say every day is just the same 300 words over and over. So let me ask you a question. Would you rather study the dictionary of 90,000 words or find out what those 300 are? Now, this sent me on a journey to discover not only what are those top 300 words, but what is number 1? What are the top 10, top 50? Language, I discovered, is built not like a dictionary of thousands of words, but more like an onion, where you have the core in the middle of the top words you need every single time you step outside the house. Hello, how are you? What are you doing today? Goodbye, see you later. Then you have layer 2, which is words that are slightly less important, but still absolutely essential for daily life. And it turns out, when you get to 7 layers of the onion, you have 300 words and enough to have a basic conversation in Spanish. So that's how the layers method was born. And yes, since then, there's many people that have gone from beginner to conversational in those 5 weeks. Now, what I want to show you today is a recording of my most popular masterclass. By this point, I've done it for tens of thousands of people. And it's the 8 words that you'll find in almost every sentence in Spanish. I call it 8 magical words. And what makes these words so powerful is that almost any sentence you can think of in Spanish, you'll find at least one of these in the middle, and sometimes 2, 3, 4, or even more of them in the same sentence. So let's get to it.
So these are the top 8 words in all of Spanish. But what do I mean by the top 8 words? Well, if you were to measure, you would find that these 8 words are used more and are more powerful than any other word in all of Spanish. By far, it's not even close. If you were to think of a sentence, a random sentence right now, the chances are you would need 1, maybe 2 or 3 of these words in that sentence. And I'm going to prove it to you right now. If you want to go and have a conversation in Spanish, you have to be able to make a sentence. That makes sense? Now look, want, go, have. You have to. By the way, have to and have are not the same at all, and we're going to get into that. Be. Able, which is the same as can, I am able. And make and do, by the way, are the same word in Spanish. So I've used all of these 8 just about in one single sentence, and you can see how powerful these words are. So normally you go and start off learning words like swim and run, but you'll find that you actually don't say those as much as you think you do in real life. Although they're nice to learn, the ones you need are these words right here. I'll give you another example of why they're so important. We're doing this recorded, but normally I do this live. And I start off covering all of these up, so you can't see these. And I ask people on my live, just come up with any random sentence you can think of, anything. And pretty much, I would say 8 or 9 out of 10 sentences people come up with, these words, 1 of them or 2 of them or 3 of them are included in what they come up with. And I want to show you that. So I've actually copy pasted some of the ones that they've given me recently. A guy called Paul in one of my lives, you have to go to the bathroom. Orville, we have 2 cats. Someone called Kedar said, you are going, let's go. I can, which is the same as to be able. I want to reserve a table. These are things we say quite often. I mean, maybe not we have 2 cats unless you're introducing yourself and explaining who you are. But certainly you can look at these and you'll realize These are things you say quite often in the real world. I'm from England, nice to meet you. I'm here now. When will you be here? I'm busy doing my work. So all of these 8 are included there. So if you want to be able to make a sentence in Spanish, you really do need to master these 8 words. And I can tell you that if you don't have a mastery of these 8 words, I already know that you cannot string your own sentence together in Spanish. Now in this video, it's going to take me a while just to cover the first 4. So what I'll do is the first 4 of these in this video, and the next 4 I'll do in a part 2, just so you don't have to sit through such a long video. Now, I highly recommend you stick around till the end of the video because the last word we're going to deal with is this one. Tener que, to have to. If you know a lot of Spanish words, I bet you're not using this one, and you should be because it's one of the top 8 and it's going to make you sound a lot more Spanish when you know how to use it. Now, what makes Spanish so difficult is that in English, if I learn the word want, go, have, I want, you want, they want, we want, everybody wants. Go, if I learn the word go, I can use it immediately. I learn to say go and I can say I go, you go, they go, we go. Spanish is not like that. And this is what makes Spanish so difficult and makes people so frustrated. So if I learn the word querer, to want, I still can't use it. I still have to figure out how to put it in a sentence, and it changes for every person. Let me show you what I mean. We're going to start off with querer. So we can see at the top that to want is querer. But if we say I want, it's no longer querer. Now it changes. The word for I is yo, and the word for want in this case is now quiero. So that ER at the end has changed to an O. And that is a pattern that is extremely common in Spanish. Whenever you're talking about I, the word like the want or the go or the can or the have is going to end in an O. And because it ends in an O, we know you're talking about yo, I. Now one more little thing to notice here. In this particular case, this is not always the case, but there's an I that gets added into the middle. That's not the case for all of these. Let's move on to the next one. If I wanted to say you want, can we just say, learn the word for you and then say tú querer? No, we can't. What we have to do is say tú quieres. So this ES at the end is what refers to or references the word tú. And by the way, this tú has an accent, but don't stress too much about those accents. They're really not important in Spanish. If you put them on or get them off or leave them off, it doesn't matter too much. There's only 1 or 2 words where they matter, and I'll always show you when that actually matters. Now, we've seen here that to want is querer, but you can't say yo querer or tú querer. Like in English, look, it stays the same. Want, want, want. So very easy in English, very difficult in Spanish. But at least there is some solace in the fact that if it ends in an S, it's always going to be talking about tú. And if it ends in an O, it's always going to be talking about yo. So at least we know that. Let's try to make a sentence. All right, let's say that you're at the restaurant and you want to say, I want a coffee. We'll add the word please at the end. How would you say that in Spanish? Well, we know how to say I want. It's right over here, okay? Yo quiero. A is un, coffee is café. Alright, so I want, yo quiero, un café. Let's do, I want a hamburger. So you already know how to do this now. The word for hamburger is hamburguesa. So I know it's going to be yo quiero una hamburguesa. Okay, why is it una? Well, a coffee, the word for a is un. But with hamburger, the word for a is una. There's 2 words for a in Spanish. One for masculine things, coffee is masculine. One for feminine things. It's kind of easy to know if it's masculine or feminine because most of the time feminine words end in a. So we're talking about a feminine hamburger. And masculine words, most of the time they end in e or o. So we'll get to a few more examples of these now. Let's move this down in the page so we can see more. And we're going to do you want, right? We know how to say you want because it's right up here. We've just learned that. Tú quieres. So how about you want a beer? Oh, not beer. Right, that's una cerveza. You want, tú quieres una cerveza. And by the way, Mexican, Latin American pronunciation, cerveza. In Spain, cerveza. So the C here and the Z or the Z are pronounced like a TH in Spain. Cerveza. ¿Tú quieres una cerveza? Let's just fix the spelling of this because some people get quite upset about that. But really, remember, those don't matter too much, those little accents. And I will say, you want French fries, chips. So chips in England, and then French fries in America. French fries. So we know it's tú quieres. Tú quieres means you want patatas fritas. Literally, patatas means potatoes, fritas, fried. Fried potatoes, deep fried potatoes. So, we now know that if you want to say want, it's querer. But if you start to use it in a sentence, you can't do that unless you change querer. Alright? So querer changes for I to yo quiero, and for you to tú quieres. Now here's the thing in Spanish, which is different to almost every language I know. Because of the fact that it ends in O for yo, it can only ever be referring to yo if it ends in an O, and therefore you can actually remove the word yo completely. So if you remove that, quiero still means I want. And if you remove the tú, quieres still means you want, whether you leave it in or not. And because of this, the Spanish 99% of the time, or let's say 90% of the time, they will actually leave that word off. So instead of saying, I want a coffee, yo quiero un café, por favor, by the way, please, por favor, you can remove the word yo completely and it still means the same thing. In other words, these two words in English, I want, represent one word in Spanish. And these two words represent one word in Spanish. Okay, so one word in Spanish equals two words in English. The O on the end, we already know you're talking about I. And the same thing here, I can remove the word tú. Why? Because quieres ends in an S. So a Spanish person will know that when you say that S at the end, that refers to tú, you. Same thing here, I can remove this. Put differently, the word quieres means you want. And if you say tú quieres, it still means you want. So of course we don't need the word here, just like in English, we're not saying chips or some chips, we're just saying chips, patatas fritas. Alright, so we've learned how to use the word want, querer, in Spanish. Now we're going to move on to the next word, to go. And I have to say, to go is probably, in fact definitely, the number one on this list of most used words, and you're going to see why. If you think about it, you can say this in so many different scenarios, and you can also use it to talk about the future. Tomorrow I'm going to school, tomorrow or next week I'm going to visit America, future tense. So that's one of the reasons why this is the most powerful word in all of Spanish. So, just as before, the fact that you've learned how to say go, which is ir, that doesn't mean you can actually use it yet. Alright, now you still have to learn how to put it in a sentence. Unlike in English, I go, as you can see in English it stays exactly the same. You go, it stays exactly the same. So, what are we going to do? Well, I go, yo voy. Now granted, this doesn't exactly follow that pattern of ending in an O. It's one of those exceptions. However, you should learn this word so early on. And a lot of teachers won't teach this early on because it's got that exception to the rule, where it doesn't follow that beautiful pattern, ending in an O, the pattern that you'll start to see the more that you do Spanish. But I believe that it's important to learn the most useful words first. Why would I want to learn something like run or swim early on when I can't even say something that I need in every single sentence, like go or want or do? So, tú vas. So this E changes to voy and vas. Now the V is actually pronounced like a B in Spanish. So you can say yo voy, tú vas. You don't have to do a strong V. If you do say a V, make it kind of a soft V so it sounds like it's halfway between a B and a V, like voy, vas. You can see how you kind of make it a little bit unclear. That's exactly how you speak in Spanish. So let's make a sentence with to go. Now the first sentence I'm going to write here is I'm going to the beach. But the way I'll write it is I go to the beach. The reason for that is if you're saying I'm going in Spanish to the beach, really the first thing you should do is translate that in your head to I go to the beach. And this is actually English that's the exception. If you learn a lot of languages, you realize to say I'm going, in most languages they just say I go to the beach. And that's exactly how it is in Spanish. Now we know how to say I go. Yo voy a la playa, to the beach. A is to, la is the, and beach is playa. What about I'm going to the shop? So I go, let's do not shop, let's go, I go, let's do something that's masculine. So let's do I go to the restaurant. This is a masculine word. So I'm going, remember, I'm going to the restaurant. In Spanish, you would think to yourself before you translate, I go to the restaurant. Well, we know I go, yo voy. Now this time we're not going to say yo. Why? Because if you say the word voy, you already know that we're talking about yo. Because voy only refers to yo, always. It can never be speaking about they, we, you. It has to be I. So all we have to say is voy a al, in this case, restaurante. Okay, question comes up. Rob, why are we saying al restaurante but a la playa? Well, this is very, very important and very, very simple to understand. If I want to say to the beach, it's a la playa. And if I want to say to the restaurant, sorry, why do I keep saying playa? It's al restaurante. Now, why? What's the difference? Well, what I'm actually saying, the beach is la playa and the restaurant is el restaurante. So if I remove these words here and I just say the beach, okay, let's make a space here so it's easier to see. The beach is la playa. The restaurant is el restaurante. So this is masculine, you know, because it ends in E. Normally that's what it means. And this is feminine, so that's why it's la and el. Two words for the, just like there are two words for a up here. Una, la, el. Now if I wanted to say to the beach, it's a la playa and a el restaurante. It's very easy for me to say a la playa, but it's very difficult to say al restaurante. Try to say these two words without that little break in your throat. Don't say a el, because no one speaks like that in real life. They say a el. Just like you make no break here when you speak, you say ala. Make no break here and try and say that out loud. Al. You automatically end up saying this, al. And so over the years, spelling has changed to push those two words together and match the way people actually speak. Another way of saying it is a plus el equals al. That's all. Whereas a plus la, whoops, that's the wrong sign, equals a la. So it doesn't change at all. That's all it is. So it's pretty simple. I go to the restaurant, or I'm going to the restaurant. Voy al restaurante. Now we're going to say you go to the shop, or you are going to the shop. So this is you go, tú vas. So we're going to say, instead of tú vas, we're just going to say vas. Why? Because we know that if it ends in an S, just like with quieres, right? Quieres, it's always referring to you, tú. So much so that we don't even need to say the word tú. Vas a la, the word for shop is tienda. Tienda. Vas a la tienda. So, last one we're going to say, you're going to school, or you go to school. Alright, I'm going to tell you what the word for school is, and you try to say this by yourself, okay? The word is escuela. There's a few other words which I'll show you too. So how would you say you go to school? Remember, the word for to is a. And this ends in an A, so you don't have to worry about the whole a plus el thing now because we're talking about a feminine word. How would you say that? Give it a try on your own. It's vas a la escuela. Well done. Pretty simple. Okay, as long as you know how to use the word ir and change it for different people, and as long as you're using words that are super common, that are in every sentence, you can now make your own sentences in Spanish. It's a difficult language, but this is how you make it easy. So, to recap, you don't need the yo here. Voy refers to two words in English. And in the same way over here, voy refers to two words in English. You go is all covered by that one word in Spanish. One word in Spanish, two words in English. One word in Spanish equals two words in English. This is always the case with these things. Once again, vas, you go. One word in Spanish equals two words in English. Remember that. That's going to come in handy as we work through the next words. Okay. Just a quick note, side note here, a little bonus. There's other words for school. For example, in Spain, or actually in most Spanish-speaking countries, I've checked with a lot of people now, the word for primary school. So school is escuela, school in general. Now, there is a separate word they use for primary school. So when my kids, for example, when they go to school, they don't say I'm going to escuela, they say I'm going to colegio, primary school, colegio. And my daughters that are in high school, they don't say I'm going to escuela, they say I'm going to instituto, which is high school. All right? So let's just put this here. And this is the case in most Spanish-speaking countries, okay? And if it's not, ask them where you are. But I know I've checked with Mexico, I've checked with Nicaragua, I think it was. A lot of them have all told me the same thing, and no one's told me anything different yet. I live in Spain, and this is certainly the case. Now, one more thing to note. Instead of, if you do move to a Spanish-speaking country, they're not going to say the whole word. They're not going to say colegio, they're going to say cole. They're not going to say instituto, they're going to say insti. Alright? Because these words, colegio, ended in an O, in fact they both do, they are masculine words. So they are el, not la. El cole, el insti. Okay? So I'm going to show it to you like this. El cole, el insti. So how would you say, remember this rule that we spoke about here? A plus el equals al. How would you say you go to school using the word cole? You would say vas al cole. You go to school. You are going to school. Same thing. Remember, al is a el. So what you're actually saying is vas a el cole. But you can't say a el, so you say al. But because escuela is feminine, ending in an A, we can say vas a la. So a la versus al. They mean the same thing. So this brings up the question, what's the difference between Spanish from Spain and Latin America? Well, they're the same language. It's like English from Britain or America, Australia, New Zealand. Everyone understands each other. The accent might be a bit different. In some countries, they might choose a little bit of a different word here for school, but they will still understand each other in all the words. The big thing is that accent that I spoke about earlier when it comes to a word like cerveza or cerveza, where the C and the Z is pronounced as an S in Latin America. Both are pronounced as an S. But in Spain, they're both pronounced as a TH. Let's get back to the masterclass. So now you know that when you learn the words want and go in Spanish, it's not enough just to learn the words, but you have to learn how to change the endings of the words first before you can start putting them in a sentence. And actually, there's more than that, because if you think about it, we've just spoken about I and you. But what about he, she, it wants? What about we want, they want, and there's even one for you guys want. And if you're wondering if the endings change every time in a different way for all of these people, unfortunately, yes, they do. And that is why I highly recommend in the beginning phases, you only focus on I and you. And this is not an approach you'll see anywhere else in any language course, because what they do is they show you the whole list at first, assuming that all of these are equal in terms of priority, but they're not. Because if you think about it, when you're learning Spanish and you want to have a conversation with someone, which should be your goal, is to actually converse, right? Not just to learn all the book knowledge. In a real situation, you'll corner yourself with one person in a room and you'll try to speak to one person at a time. You're not going to just walk into a big crowd and start speaking to a group where you talk about we or you guys or even they. In real life, you speak to one person and you talk about, where are you from? I'm from this place. What are you doing tomorrow? It's always I, you, I, you, I, you. And this is a massive tip, because if you focus just on getting comfortable changing the verb endings for I and you with the most important words, the ones we've shown you in this masterclass, then you're going to be able to actually start speaking much quicker than the people who start to learn all of these endings for all the different versions, and they get so confused. And normally what happens, and I've spoken to them many times, people like this, is they see the long list and they go, this is just too much, and they give up, and I don't want that for you. So in my Spanish course, the layers method, you only work with I and you for many of the most important verbs, like 20 or 30 of them, the ones that you're going to need all the time. And you get comfortable changing the endings for just I and you so that you can have a conversation in real life. Your first goal is to get conversational, and then you start to learn the rest of them. And that's exactly what we're doing in this masterclass. We've done the first two. Let's move on to the next two. So, to have, Spanish is tener. Now, what do you think it's going to change to when we say I have? What do you think it's going to end in? Well, if you said O, you're exactly correct. Yo tengo. So that G makes it a little bit kind of weird. But what is regular to the pattern is that it's going to end in an O. And what do you think it's going to end in if you say you have? If you said S, you are absolutely correct. Tú tienes. Alright, so here we have quieres, vas, tienes. They always end in S. That S is referring to the tú, or it's kind of matching with the tú, and the O is matching with the yo. Now what I want to do here is actually show you in a spreadsheet, because if I show it to you in this way, you can see much better how the pattern works. First of all, the main version of these words always end in an R. Okay, so if you see them ending in an R, you know that that's the version with the word to in front. To go, ir. To want, querer. That R at the end kind of matches with the word to in English. And over here, the pattern isn't as obvious because of this Y over here, but still there is an O in the middle, and that's pretty near to the end. And so if it ends in an O, you can see every time that it's going to be referring to I. And same here, the S at the end is referring to you, or tú in Spanish. And that pattern becomes clearer and clearer the more that you learn these Spanish action words, these verbs. Now, most people, what they try to do is, or most classes and courses, they always try to teach you the words that look the prettiest, that don't break the pattern. And unfortunately, the reason I think that's a mistake is you end up learning words that you don't need. The reality is, the way that language works is the words that are used the most actually are the ones that are often not following the rule, irregular. And that's because you can think of it like a car. The more that you use it, the more wear and tear there is, the more things can change. The more something gets used, the more a word gets used in a language, the more opportunity it has to kind of break the rules and change and evolve over time. And so that's why the most common word, like go, has broken the rules quite a bit here. The fact that this doesn't even look like the original word. And so even though these common words are a little bit harder to learn because they kind of add these little I's in the middle and they break the rules a bit and they add these funny G's in, the fact that they are so much more useful than the words you would normally learn in a Spanish course makes it worth it. You don't need to go and study the pattern first because your brain is a pattern recognition machine. What you need is to be able to speak first, to be able to start communicating. And if you learn these kind of words early instead of the words you normally learn in a course like to swim and apples and carrots and things like that, because the words follow a normal standard, if you learn those first, you might be spending months or even years just learning words that you don't actually need. Where in this case, you'll be learning words that you can go out and use today, on day one. You're not studying the pattern as much as studying the important words, but let your brain, which naturally picks up patterns, do the rest and pick up the pattern as you go. So now that we know how to say have, I have, you have, let's try to make a sentence. Let's do I have a car. So we already know how to say I have. It's right here. The word for car is coche. This is a masculine word. It's a male word. So yo tengo a car. Will it be un coche or una coche? Well, it's masculine, as I said. Un coche. Well done if you got that correct. If you did not put in the yo, you are absolutely correct. Okay, if you put it in or if you take it out, they're both correct. The more common way that someone would speak is without the word yo. Tengo un coche. What about I have a house? I have a house. The word for house is casa. And after this, I'll go back and show you some other words for car. Tengo una casa. Why is it una? Because casa ends in a. So we know most likely it's going to be a feminine word. Tengo una casa. Tengo un coche. Tengo una casa. In Spain, they say coche. But so I'm going to put here Spain for you. Let's say Spain is coche. Latin America, in most countries, they will say carro, or they'll say auto, depending on the country. And I think in most countries you can actually say both, carro and auto. But in Spain, it's coche. So again, that's one of the small differences, but as you can see, it's the same language. And by the way, in Spain, carro is a shopping cart at the mall, or the cart that you push your baby in, like a pram. All right, now we're going to say, you have a child. Now, this child is a boy, and so a boy child is called niño. If your child was a girl, you would say niña. We're going to say a boy child this time. So, you have, tienes, un niño. Alright, if this was a girl, you would have to say una niña. So, un coche, una casa, una niña, and un niño. Now, this little enya, this little sign at the top here, just as a side note, this used to be literally an N and a Y without that thing on top. And that's the sound it makes, niño. And in Catalan, a related language, they still spell it like this. They have an N and a Y. Why did it change? Well, back in the Middle Ages, the monks were translating the Bible and they were doing it by hand, and they often needed to save space, which is where a lot of these little symbols come from. So what they did was they decided to make the Y represented by the little line above the N, and that's literally what the line represents, is a Y. Now we're going to say, you have a friend. Now, once again, we're going to specify that this friend is a girl. So the word for friend in Spanish, if it's a boy, amigo. If it's a girl, amiga. How are we going to say that? Tienes una amiga. Okay, so we have dealt with how to say to have, tener. I have, tengo. You have, tienes. Now there's another word similar to this, which I told you at the beginning of the video, that this is the word you're probably not using. And it's very important that you do, to have to, tener que. What a lot of people are saying instead is they're saying necesito, I need to, I need to. However, I want to explain to you why you should be saying tengo que instead, alright? Tener que instead. Because in English, if you go around saying I need, it's too much, it's too strong. And if you think about it, most people don't really think about this, but if you think about it and you measure, you will find that you're actually saying I have to go now, I have to eat. You say this way more often, probably 90% of the time, alright? Some people don't, but most of us do. And it's the same in Spanish. So if you go and learn Spanish and you always want to say necesito, 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 you're going to sound a little out of place, and therefore you're going to sound like a beginner. It still works, but it's worth learning this word because it's a top 8 word. It's super, super useful. And as soon as you know how to say tener, you also know how to say tener que. It's not that much different, okay? In fact, I can copy paste this over here. So this is going to make you sound a lot more Spanish, and you're going to make a lot of progress when you speak in real life. You start using this word instead. So instead of I have to, you have to. Alright, so yo tengo que. You just take this que and you can stick it there. Alright, so the que does not change. Now, why do we say que? A lot of you think, well, you know that que means what, and that's true. Other times it means that. So in this case, it's the same question in English. Why do we say to? I have to. What does the to mean? It's not like you're going to a place. If you have to eat, you're not going anywhere. The to means nothing, all right? And I'll explain to you why we use these two random words, to and que. They kind of don't mean what they normally mean in the situation. What they are doing, in order to understand that, first you need to understand the difference between have and have to. Let me show you this sentence here, okay? You have a friend. To have a friend, or to have a child, or to have a house, or to have a car, it's showing possession, all right? So tener shows that you possess something. Possession, maybe ownership. You don't need anything. There's no lack because you already possess that friend, that house, that shirt, that car. But if you say, for example, I have to buy a car, immediately you know that you don't have a car, right? Therefore, they are exactly opposites. If you have to buy a car, that means I don't have a car. I'm lacking a car. If you don't have a house, the opposite of I have a house is I have to go and get a house. I have to buy a house. I have to look for a house. You have a child? No, I have to have children. So as soon as you say I have to, it really means that you don't have that thing. Otherwise, you wouldn't have to go and get it. So it shows a lack. In other words, this word to represents a lack of something. We don't think about that in our own language, but it's the same in Spanish. This que, it's like I have not got something, right? I have, in English, not got a friend, so I have to go and make friends. So let's make a sentence. Let's literally use the same sentences as before. So instead of I have a car, we're going to say I have to buy a car. Now, the word for buy, you know what car is? Buy is comprar. Comprar. So this word, you'll notice when we use have to, naturally the sentences start becoming a bit longer, right? Because it's often that you have to do something. So we have to add the doing, and now the sentences are becoming a bit longer. The doing here is to buy. So I have to, it's right here. And remember, we do not need the yo. Tengo que, I have to. Buy, right there. Comprar. Comprar un, let's say, carro, Mexican style. What about the next one we had is I have a house, I have to find a house. I have to find a house. And find, in Spanish, is encontrar. Encontrar. It's like encounter, to find, encounter. Okay. So, tengo que encontrar, to find, a house. Una casa. Let me point out, tengo que covers I have to. Tengo que covers I have to. Now let's do you have to. So we say you have to have children. Yeah, you have to have children. Let's do that for now. So children, it's the same as the word for child, but it's plural. So it adds an S on the end. Now, we can see here, tienes que is you have to. Tienes que. Oh, to have. Remember we used to have earlier? To have is tener. And I'm going to explain in a second why we're not saying tengo. I'll show you in a second. To have, tener, niños. Alright, some of you are thinking, I know what you're thinking. We're talking about you here. Why don't you say tienes? Because if you look over here, you have is tienes. Okay? If we're talking about you, why are we saying tener? Well, because tener means to have. And that's exactly what we're saying. To have. Not you have. The best way for me to show you this is to translate it back to English. Tienes que, you have to. Tener, well, the best way for me to show you is to show you the wrong way first. So, let's say that you said tienes, because we're talking about you, and you know that you have is tienes. So, if I translated this back to English, I would say, tienes que, you have to. Tienes means you have, not just have. And then children. In other words, one word in Spanish, I told you earlier, equals 2 words in English. So here you're saying you have to, you have children. That's why it's incorrect. All right? If anyone's told you rules about you can't conjugate two verbs in a row, that's not true. There's plenty of times you can. That's not how you should think about it. How you should think about it is if you want to make a long sentence, you take it piece by piece. You have to translate it into Spanish. Tienes que. Next one. Have. Are we saying you have? No, we're just saying have. Have. Tener. Tener. I'll put that in red too. Children, niños. If you translate it phrase by phrase, you won't go wrong. You're going to be able to make long sentences in Spanish all by yourself. And I'm sure a lot of you have realized from this video that you can do that already. We're going to make some longer sentences in a second. If this word, tener que, is being a little bit complicated for you, it's because of the fact that it often comes with longer sentences. It gives you the ability to make longer sentences. So let me step it back one level, make it one level easier with a shorter sentence. I have to eat. Alright, so we're going to say, tengo que. Let's translate that bit by bit. By the way, the word for eat is just comer. So, you literally just have to say, I have to, and then comer. I have to is, tengo que comer. Alright, it's just the fact that the sentence is a bit longer because we're saying, I have to buy, instead of just I have to buy a car. But if you take it piece by piece, you'll be okay, right? Remember, in this sentence, we're not saying, I have to, I buy a car. That's why we're saying comprar. And some of you might know that if you wanted to say I buy, you would say compro instead of comprar. Some people would have translated the sentence that way mistakenly because they think if it starts with I, now we have to go and change all those action words to end in O because of what I showed you earlier here where they end in O if we're talking about I. But we're not talking about I, are we? We're saying to buy. To buy, comprar. So I'm adding this one to the list, tener que. Just putting the que underneath because you can see now the pattern starts to form. The more words you know, the more you can start to see the pattern. Okay, these are the 4 words, but now we're going to go a little crazy. Now we're going to see if we can put them all into one sentence. And I'm going to show you that after watching this, you now have the ability to make long sentences in Spanish, and we're going to do 3 or 4 of those together. Okay, so here we have them, to want, to go, to have to. Now let's try to put them all together to make a super long sentence. Let's start with just want and go. So we'll put it down here. I want to go to the party. How would you say that in Spanish? Well, I want, we can see, quiero, to go, ir. So we start off with, quiero ir a la fiesta, if you didn't know the word for party. Now some of you might be thinking, if we're talking about I, then why doesn't this word change to boy? Because I go is boy. And that's the wrong way to think about it. Because what you're doing is you're going, who are we talking about? Oh, it's I. Now let's just look at all those action words in the sentence and change them to the I version. In other words, the I version of want is quiero, and the I version of go is voy. So you'll say quiero voy. A lot of people ask me this every day when I do lives, etc. And the way to think about it is you should really be translating in English in your head phrase by phrase. Then you'll know that it's not correct. And I'm going to prove that to you quickly. The easiest way to do that is just by double checking, by translating back into English. So here, quiero means what? I want. Voy means I go. So you can see straight away that this is incorrect because you can't say I want, I go to the party. Voy doesn't mean go. Voy means I go. So if you want to say I want to go, well, to go is ir. And that's the reason to go. That's the reason you can't say quiero voy a la fiesta. You need to look at each section, phrase by phrase, and say, what are we trying to say here? We're saying, I want, quiero. To go, what is that? Is it voy or is it ir? Well, it's ir. To the party, la fiesta. Let's try to make this a bit longer now. Let's say, I want to go to the party tonight, but I have work tomorrow. Okay, so let's start with that first. Tonight is esta noche. Esta noche. And then we're going to say, but I have work tomorrow. All right. Now I'm just going to make this a little easier to follow by making that red so you can see quiero, one word in Spanish, 2 words in English. To go, 1 word in Spanish, 2 words in English, like I always say. To the party tonight, but I have work tomorrow. But is pero. I have right here. Yo tengo, or just tengo. The word for work is trabajo. Trabajo. And I'm sure you all know tomorrow is mañana. Alright, so tengo, 1 word in Spanish, 2 words in English. And then trabajo is work tomorrow. Now, what if we wanted to say, so I have to sleep? Alright, the word for sleep is dormir. And to say so is actually 2 words in Spanish. Así que. So how would you say that? So I have to sleep. Now you can see we're using all 4 of the words we've learned. Want, go, have, and have to. So is así que. And these 2 words represent just so, okay? I have to, we know what that is. Tengo que dormir. Alright, so I'll just highlight that so you can see again. Tengo que represents I have to. Now look how long a sentence you've been able to string together, and I bet you couldn't do that before this masterclass, because what I've shown you is that if you learn the most important words and then learn how to use them in a sentence by changing the endings based on who you are talking about, you can actually string together really, really long sentences that you probably couldn't before. Now let's try and make it a little bit harder by, instead of just saying I, let's change this in English to I want to go, and then, but you have work tomorrow, so you can't come to the party, okay? You have work tomorrow, so you have to sleep. And let me point out quickly how these sentences, being so long, really are wrapped around these important words that we've learned. These are the words that enable you to build long sentences. Everything else kind of wraps around these important words that change based on the situation, whereas the rest of them don't really change. That's why they're so powerful and so necessary. You have to sleep. Okay, so we need to change now tengo. We know exactly what to do. If we look up here, is it tengo or tienes? Well, now we have to just change it to tienes. Pero tienes trabajo mañana. Así que you have to sleep. Tienes que dormir. Okay, quiero ir a la fiesta esta noche, pero tienes trabajo mañana, así que tienes que dormir. Now, remember how I said you can remove the yo and the tú, and that's certainly true. But there's actually some times in Spanish where it makes sense to put them in. It gives a little more emphasis or context. And this is definitely one of those times where you might want to stick it back in. Because what you're saying is, I want to go to the party tonight, but you have work tomorrow, so you have to sleep. So this would be a great time to put in at least the word tú. I wouldn't necessarily put in yo. You could though, because you're emphasizing the big difference between you and me. But let me show you how this would sound if I put the tú's in here. Okay, so quiero ir a la fiesta esta noche, pero tú tienes trabajo mañana. Así que tú tienes que dormir. So what we're doing is we're kind of saying, I'm different to you, and we're emphasizing that difference by adding that word back in. Let's do the next sentence. Let's try to make one more nice long sentence. Let's say, I want to go to a restaurant. How would you say that in Spanish? I'm not going to show you now. Try and say that all by yourself. Quiero ir a un restaurante. By the way, here's a great tip for pronouncing when you see 2 vowels like this in a row. So Spanish only has 5 different sounds, where in English we have like 12. So in English, restaurant, this would be like an O sound, which is not one of the 5 vowels, right? It's 2 vowels mixed together to make a new sound. That's why there's 12 sounds in English. Spanish just has the 5 vowel sounds. So when you see 2 vowels together, you have to pronounce each one by one. So you say restaurante. So you say restaurante. Restaurante. Okay, so quiero, I want. In fact, I can just copy paste this because I want to go. We have the same thing here. Alright, so to go in orange
matches up to ir. And then let's say, but I don't have money. I don't have money. So we know the word for, whoops, let's put this up there. The word for but, we know, is pero. So let's say that. Pero. Now, when you have something negative, like I don't do this or I don't want this, the first thing you need to understand is don't think about don't, all right? Don't try to translate don't into Spanish because there's no word for don't in Spanish. You have to think to yourself, no, I have. Instead of I don't have, no, I have. You just add the word no. So I have is tengo. No, I have is no tengo. That should really help you a lot. You can't say don't in Spanish. A lot of people spend ages trying to think, how do I say don't? How do you say do? You can't say do and don't in this kind of context in Spanish at all. You literally just have to add the word no in the front. Pero no tengo. And you should know the word money. I think a lot of people know it. Dinero. Pero no tengo dinero. All right, let's try to make it a little bit longer. Let's try to add in that word have to. So, let's put in and this time instead of so. And I have to save. All right, the word for save is ahorrar. Ahorrar, to save. So, and it's just I have to, we know what that is now. Tengo que ahorrar. All right, so tengo que is I have to. And tengo, let's put no tengo. We'll put that all in red because that's all part of this little phrase here. I don't have, no tengo. No tengo dinero. All right. And then what if we wanted to change this to, like in the last situation, I want to go to a restaurant tonight. Or let's switch it around. You want to go to a restaurant tonight. But I don't have money and I have to save. Okay, we're going to do that same principle where we kind of emphasize the contrast between I and you, all right? You want, we know what that is, quieres. Quieres ir a un restaurante. So you want to go to a restaurant. But no tengo dinero. So we're going to say yo no tengo dinero. Y tengo que ahorrar. So I probably wouldn't put the yo over here because it's kind of obvious now, like we've already done the emphasis on the yo. And I might even say the same thing up here. I might even remove the tu over there. It might even be, you could do it, but it would probably be even more sort of natural and smooth. This is really a question of feel when you get to that stage where you start to add in the word yo to emphasize the difference between me and you. So, quieres ir a un restaurante, pero yo no tengo dinero. Y tengo que ahorrar. I don't have money, and I have to save. So now you can see that if you learn these top 8 words, and we've done the first 4, in the next video, we're going to do the next 4 words. And in fact, in that video, I'm actually going to incorporate the top 4 words as well. So we'll do all 8, and I'll show you how to break down these 4, and we'll make sentences with the rest of them all together. Try and make some super long sentences. I'm showing you here that if you learn how to use these words, you can make very long sentences all by yourself. And this is how you do it, and this is what we've done today. Now, as you know, by learning to change the endings of these words, you can start to make very long sentences. But don't forget what I said earlier. There's not just I and you. I recommend learning I and you for all the important words first, but later, at some point, you're going to have to learn he, she, it, they, we, because the word is different every time for those. In other words, for example, when I say we want, you would say the word for we, which is nosotros, and then you would say queremos. Alright, so that mos at the end is actually referring to nosotros. Forgot the S there. The mos always is paired with nosotros. Again, that means you don't even need to say nosotros because it's kind of included in the end of the word. Now, if I've helped you today, if I've simplified it for you, and I've shown you how to unblock your Spanish using these important words and shown you how to string sentences together, and you want to know what the next step is for you, I do have a full course from beginner to conversational in Spanish and beyond. The first goal you should have is just to get conversational, not to learn all the extra words that you don't need and grammar that's not going to serve you in the beginning. And that's what my course, The Layers Method, is all about. And you can find it at school.com/gonSpeaking.
If you've been learning Spanish and you've been doing courses, learning words and grammar and thinking, when am I going to need this in real life? I know exactly how you feel. Remember, I learned 6 languages. It took me over 20 years. I picked up a degree in linguistics along the way. And one of the most important things I learned is that most of the stuff we learned, 90% of the stuff we learn in these courses, is grammar that you don't need and words that you don't need. Why is that? Well, what most course creators and language teachers don't know is that Spanish has 90,000 words, but it's 300 words that you actually need, and it's the same 300 words we use over and over every day. You're learning words that are way outside of the top 300, and that's why you have that feeling like you're just not getting anywhere, it's irrelevant, or you're wasting your time. Another thing to understand is that language is not this dictionary of 90,000 words. It's not this ocean of words you want to dive into and just hope that some of them stick, hope that you get wet. No, every word has a different weight of importance. Language is not built like a dictionary. Language is built like an onion. In the very middle, that core of the onion, are the top few words, the ones that you cannot step outside without saying, hi, how are you? Bye, see you later. What are we doing today? Things like that. That's layer 1, that's the core of the onion. Layer 2 are things that are slightly less used, but still absolutely essential every time you speak. Layer 3 and 4, and it turns out by the time you get to 7 layers, that makes up 300 words, and that's enough to have a basic conversation. That's enough to get you started. Once you can speak, now you can communicate, now you can start to ask, how do you say this in Spanish to someone in Spanish? Now you can start to learn the language in Spanish as people speak around you, because you're communicating with them in their language. You can have a basic conversation. So what's special about this method, and I'll show you here on the screen, is that when you go into the classroom area, you'll see it's laid out in terms of those layers of the onion. Layer 1 being the most common words and phrases. Layer 2, slightly more complex ones. The other thing that you don't need a lot of is all the hundreds of different grammar things that you learn in a language school. You need about 5 pieces of grammar to get conversational, and that's what's included here. The first 2 layers you don't need grammar because it's about memorizing the most important things that you want to say every time you speak. But by the time you get to layer 3, now it's time to start picking up a little bit of grammar. So learning how to use words like a and the and this and these. I explained a bit of this in the masterclass. You say una and un and el and la. So understanding the difference there is that first little bit of grammar that you need, but it's not complicated, importantly. Then the action words. Most of what we did today was all action words that allow you to make a long sentence. Layer 5, bit of future tense. Why? Because if you try to have a conversation and you want to say, what are you doing tomorrow? Tomorrow, let's do something. That's future tense. You need that to have a little conversation. You need a simplified version explaining how to use the future tense. Layer 6 is describing things, which is a little harder in Spanish than in English, but you need to be able to say big, small, hot, cold, fast, slow. And the last layer that you need to have a conversation is a simple version of the past. There's 7 past tenses in Spanish. I will only teach you 1. Stick with 1. Why? Well, I have students that come to me and they know all 7 past tenses perfectly. But because they have so much in their head, as soon as it comes to actually speaking, they just freeze because there's too many options. Learn the first past tense. Learn 1, the simple one that I'll show you. You can use that for everything, and then later as you get to layer 8, layer 9, layer 10, layer 11, now you can have a conversation. Now it's time to start adding those things. But your first goal should be to speak. You don't learn the language so you can impress your friends with grammar. You want to be able to speak, and that's what this course is all about. Now there's 3 fundamental philosophies to this course. The first is to know what the top 300 words are, and to isolate them and to work on them in order of importance. So for example, if I look at layer 2, you're going to get the cheat sheet of words and phrases that are super important. You need to be able to say these: what, why, when, how much, excuse me, here, there, etc. The second part is how are we going to commit these to memory, long-term memory. And there is actually a scientifically proven way that's way better than all the others, called spaced repetition. And for that, we use a unique flashcard app which is designed to track what you're good at and what you're not good at, and to show you what you're bad at more often. Why? Because you can't afford to have any weaknesses in the top 300 words. They're all important for every day. So you would open up the app. It would be on your cell phone, but in this case it's on the computer, just so I can show you. You press review, for example, on this particular set of flashcards, and you say. Now you look at it and you say it out loud in Spanish. You need to get your tongue used to the way that the new language sounds. You need to get used to a new path in your mouth. I would like. You say it out loud. Me gustaría. Flip the card.
Me gustaría.
And you get to hear the native speaker, so you can make sure your pronunciation's good. Then you rank yourself on the bottom. Did I fail? Was it hard, good, or easy? Let's say that was hard. Next one, I want. We've done this today. Flip the card. First, you have to say it out loud. Quiero.
Quiero.
Now, once you do that, let's imagine that I failed that. I'll press fail. What do you want? ¿Qué quieres? Say it out loud.
¿Qué quieres?
And once you've done that for a while, when you finish, it's going to give you a score. And this is the best part, because if you have a bad score, like I'm not very happy with 60, it makes you want to go again. It encourages you, it gamifies what would normally be boring, right? You're learning some of the most important basic stuff, but it forces you, or not forces you, but it encourages you to keep trying to push up your score. So when you go again, it's going to show you your failures more often than your successes. It's going to keep pulling back those cards that you failed at, which is why it's called spaced repetition. Now, the third very important part about this philosophy is that once you've memorized these top 300 words, that means you can go outside and what? Speak. That's why we have a language class where you can come and join. There's 3 a week, so you click on the calendar here and you can see that there's different times to come to the conversation class where I will be there. Now, a lot of you find this intimidating. A lot of you find that that's too much. So there's absolutely no obligation to come to the conversation class. But if you do want to practice speaking, I will then say to you, where are you from in Spanish? Depending on what layer you're working on. I'll be there, you'll be there, and you'll be able to try to speak Spanish with me and answer my questions and ask me some questions along with the other people in the class. Because the point of learning a language is to speak. Now, very importantly, you study in your own time. And as a result, you could finish the first 7 layers in 5 weeks, you could do it in 3 weeks, or you might do it in 6 months. The cost for this program is $29 a month. You go to school.com/gonSpeaking, and I'll make it the first link in the description below this video. And you'll get to a page that looks like this, and there'll be a button here that says join for $29 a month. Remember, this masterclass is part 1 of 2, so click up here to watch the next video. And if you want to get weekly free Spanish tips in your email inbox, sign up for the newsletter. It'll be the second link in the description.